Hello, hello. Before we start, I think, and I told Tim, got this beautiful little card from a student this week with some condolences about JD Whistler's passing last week, which I'm still processing. And Tim was kind enough to say, Jay, get it off your chest today. And also, I just want to say, John David Whistler was a big part of founding the school, a dear friend, just the warm, gentle, big-hearted man that whenever he saw me getting stressed out about my responsibilities with the school, would quietly invite me to his porch in Lidditz, and we'd sit there and either have a Guinness or a glass of water. And, he just got me to slow down every once in a while. His passing is like a big deal to me. I think the way I've been thinking about it is like his natural traits aren't necessarily my natural traits. My natural traits are probably what's necessary to make something like this school actually work. My goal is, as best I can, to internalize some of what he used to do for me and make it part of how I roll. I'm not sure how well that's going to go, but it'll be a constant little tap, 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 because as busy as things have been, I really haven't had time to slow down and realize what that meant to me. The other thing I was spent all last time thinking about, he was a great painter. I gotta say that. He studied with Leland Bell and all these people that our students are wish were still alive to talk to. So he really brought a lot of that through to the school and helped ground things. And the trust he built with people around Lancaster and Lidditz really did help the school over lots of little humps and stuff. And his reputation as a painter and his connection to art lovers and artists throughout the area. It'd be cool to like do some big art show for him someday. All right, Tim, now I'm ready. I think I did it. Thanks for bearing with that. Now I'm going to shift gears to my normal. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mount Gretna School of Arts lecture series, hosted here in the Pennsylvania Chautauqua's Hall of Philosophy. I want to thank Stinson Strout for his support of our summer lecture series. And then Purpose One, and just in general, the community of Mount Gretna and with the Chautauqua traditions, it's totally unique. This school could not have landed anywhere else, fully formed that first year and inspired by the Chautauqua tradition in the first place. And in general, the community is very unique. And our students are able to be here for 7 weeks straight in a real kind of boot camp style pressure cooker situation that's very rare anywhere else in higher education. They compete to get in from across the country. The program in general, it's a painting program, but it has a core niche focus on going outside and connecting with nature and learning about the nature of your own seeing. A big pile of instructors and critics come through each summer, about 12, which is maybe how much they see an entire year in college. But Tim is one of our instructors in the drawing section this year, who I was really actually very excited to bring. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and currently lives near Chicago in Elgin, Illinois, and has been a member of the Bowery Gallery in New York City since 2001, where he had a show there last October. In Chicago, Tim was represented by Hendrickson Works on Paper in 1999, which I think is before the internet, right? Right as the internet got going, he was searching for connectivity, which I think a lot of Midwestern artists do because they're so spread out, and started the Midwest Paint Group, which I found on the internet, which was new to me at the time. I don't think I got my first email address until 2001. So he was high tech and ahead. And it was really an artist-run collective group of Midwest painters that wanted to stay in touch with each other and have shows and support each other in their respective communities. And I clung to that and learned about all those artists. Many of them have come through Mount Gretna today, Lynette Lombard and others. Megan and the other Mark Lewis, Bill White.
Mark Lewis. Yeah. He's not in the group, but he's a close friend. Yeah.
The organization has produced 20 exhibits throughout the Midwest and the East Coast, from the Leedy Volkos, the Swope Art Museum, Albrecht Kemper Museum of Fine Art in Missouri, Wright State University of Ohio, the Art Museum of Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, the College of William and Mary in Virginia, and West Beth Art Center. And really started with his energy to get all that momentum going. That's just a short list. He studied at Columbus College of Art and Design for his foundation year, at Kansas City Art Institute. He studied painting with Lester Goldman, Wilbur Newald, and Stanley Lewis, earning his BFA in 1980. He received his MA in painting at the University of Tulsa in 85 and later completed a painting MFA at Northern Illinois University. Over the course of his 30-year career as a graphic designer and art director, he moved into teaching during his MFA studies and worked full-time as a visiting assistant professor at Northern Illinois University in Loyola, teaching drawing, painting, and 2D design, foundations, practically everything, graphic design, also at the Illinois Institute of Art. Today he's a professor of art at teaching graphic design at Kishwaukee College and instructor of art at the College of Lake County. He's married to Elizabeth Stanley King, a poet who works in senior management and telecommunications. His daughter Helen is a successful mechanical engineer, and their son Mitch studied early childhood learning and has begun working as a preschool teacher. Family man and an artist and a teacher. Okay, without anything further, thank you.
All right, here we go. Yeah, that October show at the Bowery Gallery, I'm gonna advertise this. I don't make profit off of my catalogs. I always mark them at cost. They're about $8 on Amazon. That's the show in New York. Every piece that was in the show. Okay, let's get on with this lecture. All right, so visual parallax is something that I've been interested in. I never had a term for it when I studied with other teachers at Kansas City. And pretty much all my graduate degrees, I didn't really study much with other teachers other than as colleagues and sharing ideas and getting critiques and feedback on my work, and giving them feedback. But at Kansas City is where really the intensive studying of becoming a painter was at. And had I not gone on to graduate school and not tried to get into teaching, I'd still be studying this stuff. So and I had stuck to a certain course of study. I don't go off in other directions like a lot of artists like to do. And so that's unique to me, maybe. But I felt that I had a mission, and I still feel like I have this mission, and I keep expanding on it, but not going off into other directions of art making, which all are valid. I do teach a lot of that other stuff in my art classes when I have to teach foundations programs, because I want my students to be well-rounded. So I want to read this quote from Matisse. I don't paint things. I only paint the difference between things. And this picture, I think, is really indicative of it's not about objects. It's about space and the difference between things. It's very important. When I teach my design classes, even my graphic design classes, I teach these strange flippy form ideas as a concept so that two-dimensional space becomes more than just flat space. And yet it's paradoxical space. And I like to show the example of Jean Lyon's work, his early abstract work. And then I usually show, and I'm not going to do it here, but I usually show some extra slides of his progression into realism and then back to this kind of comical abstract figure painting. And so you can follow these abstract flippy forms throughout all of his career. He's one of the best examples for that, where I think it's not hidden. It's obvious, his progression is, and I think that's important also as a painter, is to have some kind of understanding of this kind of form. My chalkboard exercises, I always demonstrate. I love it when I actually have a chalkboard instead of a whiteboard, because it's like pastels, only they don't work as well. But anyway, I demonstrate these. How do you construct out of a grid space these flippy forms, or on the right side, not using a grid space, just creating boxes, and then you convert them into curves and different shapes that are paradoxical, they're ambiguous, and it causes space to move you know, you hear push-pull. It's a push-pull experience of space, and it's always creating picture pressure, and those are key concepts that I want to talk about. That's parallax. Without even knowing how to see anything perceptually, parallax is a concept built into the most abstract of paintings. You can go back to medieval painting, classical Roman painting, Paleolithic cave art, and you'll see this strange kind of form happening. So this would be a demo I did for the same concept. After I did the chalkboard, then I would do a drawing demo. I'd have them working on it, and I'd be working with them, and then I'd be showing them my progress while they're working on theirs, and to give them an example. And then we would paint it, and then we would photocopy it and then collage it and turn it into another composition, a modular composition. I call it a fugue. So it's a theme that repeats itself, but it plays against itself. Now, in landscape painting, and this is a totally unfinished painting, but I liked it at this stage because it shows the same concept as that flippy box space. And I'm literally changing my perception from one angle to another angle. I'm combining two complete perspectives. It's very cubistic. And you don't always see this so clearly in most of my paintings, but it's always in all my paintings. There's always this sweep of space. It's never, and that's parallax. You're seeing things from two different angles, and then your mind merges them. So there's a chalk pastel that I've got that became one of my main things for 10 years. I hardly even oil painted anymore. I just didn't have time, like I said, raising a family, working as a graphic designer, trying to work my way into graduate school and then get a teaching career going. And so I find this pastels are easy to set up and tear down. All right, so anyway, but you can see the shapes. You see them emerging in certain areas of the painting. And then from those pastels, my mission to get back into oil painting the last 7 years, 8 years, has been to turn those into larger studio paintings. And so that was always my plan, but I never seemed to have time to get in the studio. So you see that in these, I get to concentrate on those strange little configurations of form that create the parallax in a small area, but they build out. And one of the things that I struggle with is try to get those to consolidate into big forms that then you build smaller forms into. I always work my way from the small forms out, and I'm not sure I always get to the big forms. That's always a problem, but that's the goal. And I'm always on that mission. So I was driving home from school and I experienced the Back to the Future phenomena. Motion parallax, difference between forward motion and passing by. That's the definition that I came up with. I looked it up and it corresponds to what scientists say is a good definition for motion parallax. But it also is a good definition for the kind of painting that I do and the kind of painting I like to see. I'm looking at a painting, I want to see the difference between moving forward through the painting and then passing by. How do you do that? So a true definition of visual parallax is perceptual effect where objects appear to shift position when viewed from different locations or angles. This difference in apparent position is due to the change in the viewer's perspective. It's a key factor in depth perception. So we've got another video. So this animation I found is really fun because it shows two ways to simulate motion parallax. But one way, it's flat. It doesn't really create parallax, but you sort of see motion. So let's watch. See, the background isn't shifting angle to the foreground. It's just someone running a camera across a long picture, right? Like walking by a painting at the museum. It doesn't have parallax, but now you have an animation where they have different layers that move at different speeds. I think Disney developed this technique, but I'm not sure. So the bottom right is the true parallax phenomena that you just saw in the Back to the Future. This is a John Constable at the Chicago Art Institute that I just absolutely love. I draw from it all the time. And I think hopefully you're starting to see some of those weird flippy forms in it, hopefully. But in order to see it, rather than just stand in front of it, I always look at it from angles. In the recent 5 years, I started walking by them, and I never thought to film it. I like to walk back and forth. And I find parallax that I don't see in photography in these paintings. Grab the cow or the horse or the cart and just focus on it. And then see if you notice out of your peripheral vision, the deformation of form, hopefully creating a sense of movement and motion and depth. You see a shifting forms, hopefully. It takes practice. But when you go to an art museum, try walking around it, not just staring at it from the center. Just pick any spot and see if you see things. Looks like the space is changing as you walk past it. And also the question is, which side did he do the painting from? Was he in the middle? Was he on the right? Was he on the left? Paintings can be done from any angle. So here's my pastel that I spent a lot of time on. And I'm going to compare it to a photograph that I grabbed from a film clip because I was filming a egret flying across the water. So here, I'm going to show you my painting in the same parallax movement around it, only I'm shooting it off the computer screen. Now, see if it seems flatter to you, or does it create the same weird, it has some. And my theory is that changing the angle of photograph creates a mental construction of space that you might not experience just looking at a straight on angle from the lens point of view. Now, my painting doing the same thing. See if there's any, look at the clouds for me start to separate as it turns. I did it a little slower. But the idea is that I'm trying to demonstrate that paintings have more angles, and those angles will pick up the different angles that the painter was using to make the painting. Remember when I showed you that house painting in the beginning, where I'm just clearly shifting it? All the work I do, I'm always sweeping the space with my head and shoulders, and my eyes are rolling around in my head, and it's so much more movement, and then that translates into the forms that you draw. Okay, so step back, space of a picture plane. So that's the normal picture plane we think of. We're stepping back farther to the distance, looking straight like a camera shoots. Things just overlap and go into the distance. What I'm interested in is the rotation forms that you'll see in a classical frieze. Not any frieze. A frieze is just a decorative stripe across a piece of architecture. But there's this concept that you see in classical art. And I like the idea of the frieze because it sounds like something's frozen. You know, you're freezing movement, and that's what painting does or can do. And I think all painters think about this. We all have our own ways of doing it, and they're all great ideas. But this is my way, and this is what I think was happening in a lot of classical friezes. The picture plane in an imaginary two-dimensional surface acts as a window or transparent plane between the viewer and the scene being depicted. That's the white step back space of the picture plane. And it does create, you want to have it push forward as a painter more than have it go into depth. You want the depth, but you want the pushing forward at the same time. And sometimes painters don't want the depth. They just really want flat space. And that's all great. But in order to get both, I think the classical frieze is a great concept for that. But making picture pressure is the painter's problem. I call this kind of picture plane the painter's frieze. I made this up. No one else uses this terminology. So, all right. So here's a classical frieze. This is the Parthenon. I've actually visited this in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a full-scale replica that was done for some World's Fair back in the 1890s or something. Anyway, it wasn't always a total ruin like it is now, and artists could actually draw it in more detail, and then they used all that knowledge to reconstruct their best effort, and it was a good effort. It's not everything's perfect, and they did paint the friezes, and they guessed at the colors that this frieze might have had. It's hard to tell. It's just kind of a red tinting in there in the background. So it's a horizontal band, a decorative in architecture, a horizontal band often decorated that runs along the upper wall. Or this is a mural from the Hall of Mysteries in Pompeii. One of my favorite Pompeian artworks to draw from because it's so well preserved and the figures are all complete. They're not, partial. And you can see it's like a flat space. It's like if you look at their feet are like walking on a tightrope. Nobody's really stepping back deep into space. Everyone's in a shallow space. So to get that, you'd have to have your eye level pretty much at the foot level to get that kind of a shallow space, because that's the way you put a still life. You put objects at the back of the table and at the top. If you stand up, you're looking down, there's obviously depth. When you get at eye level with the table edge, the back objects push forward. They're on the same plane of space in your picture. And that's what's happening. But then when you go up to the eye level of the characters that are depicted, you're at their eye level there too. So you have this simultaneity between the two levels in this painting. And each figure has its own turning space. It moves, it rotates in position. They're very sculptural looking. So it's really hard to figure out how you do this in painting. Picasso plays with the picture plane, obviously. We all know that. And the question he's always putting to you is, what is frontal and what is behind? And there was a whole series of these artists painting the model. And it's like, it's the same kind of space as the mural. The eye level shifts from the ground plane to the eye level of the figures. What is this about? I'm not going to give the answers. This is a study that you do as a painter. You try to figure this stuff out. So here's a clue. Here's a Picasso photo of his son on a donkey. I don't think he painted that boy on the donkey live. I think he did the painting on the right from the photo. How do you do this? Stanley Lewis called me up one night and said, Tim, I got to do some work from photography. I've never done it. How do you do it? I said, I don't do it, but I got these ideas. So I sent them this picture and a couple other ideas. And the idea here is that in the left black and white photo, you're moving to the back in a conventional picture plane. The perspective lines are converging off to the left side. In the Picasso, there's no converging lines anymore into the depth. It's parallel lines. He's moved the back feet of the donkey down, just like in the mural, almost completely down into a horizontal at the bottom. And yet the eye level of the painter is pretty much, the photographer is pretty much at the eye level of the child's eye level. And so it's a little clue how Picasso knew how to do this. It's a simple idea, and you can do it from photography. It's one way to use photography when you're not in the have a chance to actually paint live. You can twist and rotate the space, and it activates, I believe, a psychological phenomena. We all have space in our head. We all know what space experience is, but I believe it brings our understanding and memories and intuition of space alive, rather than just painting a flat photograph. They're totally flat. Here's an example of a photograph of my nephew's wife's has a horse stable and stables horses for paying customers, and she teaches horse therapy lessons for children and maybe riding lessons. But anyway, I love going to visit their little ranch, and I happen to have this photograph of the same angle perspective as the boy on the donkey in the photograph of the boy. And then the straight on side view where everything's running parallel. But the difference is the space is photographic. It's still overlapping space. It's not rotational space. So that's a photograph. You can see the underside, the right side, you can see the back leg and the front leg. And then the hip legs on the back side of the horse, you also see the back leg in. So it's a perspective space, a 1-point perspective space going in. But with the Picasso, you see the front of the shoulder legs, and you see the front view of the back legs. It's a different, it's like it's going that way instead of straight in. So this is an interesting idea. And I think it activates a twist, because the eye level up here stays the same. The head of the boy stays the same as the photo. but you can see the body is starting to change and deform compared to the photo. So it's creating a spiral effect in the composition. Looky here, Paleolithic cave artists could do Picasso. Who'd have thought they'd ever seen a Picasso before? But they got the same rotational space. So this is I think this is a very ancient human idea about pictorial composition. Here's the traditional, conventional picture plane space that we're all taught in art school and perspective studies, structural drawing. And it's simple. There's a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. Just like in the Parallax video of the animation video, you have the separate planes and they move at different speeds. And then here's another view from an angle. Here's like a view screen that you look through, a window you look through, and you see the red foreground, the yellow middle ground, and the green background. So what do we do with that? What if we turn the view frame so that your background green area drops down to the bottom of the picture on the right side, or it could be on the left side, depending on your point of view. And the middle ground is also coming down to the front edge of the picture. And then the foreground was always there. And so the foreground stays foreground, but the middle ground is middle ground, and then it becomes foreground, even though the distance and space from a photographic view would be more distant. So things that are farther away can swing illusionistically in the painting to the foreground. So you get background flipping the space, rotating the space. Here is a beautiful Fragonard that I just found on the internet a few years ago when I was looking up Fragonard more. I've always loved his work, and I couldn't believe this one, because there it is. You see the little man on the right corner there, like at a fence or something. This little figure down there, and that tree right next to him. You can see the scale shifting from that tree to the tree up here that's sort of leaning on the kind of near the top of the hill. They feel like they're in the same space, but are they? And then there's that guy who's parallel to that tree there. I think that tree there is actually way in front of that guy, but you can see that little dip of space coming down where he's being brought into the foreground. So here I did the red, yellow, green idea, where you can sort of see where's the background start at, and then how things in the middle ground start to dip into the foreground, and the things in the background start to dip into the foreground. So it's as if you're looking at the picture from this side, going across into the traditional conventional space, only you're doing it sideways. You're not doing it straight back. And now look at this Cezanne. Oh my God, it's exactly that. There it is. It's in modern painting too. And you can clearly see these houses pushing forward, and the foreground is starting to rotate and push back. So I don't like using the term push-pull because I think it usually refers to color manipulation, but it's the structural drawing version of push-pull. Look at this Courbet. I mean, he's like gonna put his hand on the bridge. He's that close in space. He's totally pushing the space and rotating it. And it's just very powerful with Courbet. And then you're not going to see this every time. I picked the most obvious examples. So you're going to have to look for this in a lot of paintings if you want to try to discover it. But so then this is what got all this going. This is what got me thinking about this in a way that I hadn't thought about it before. One day I was reading this old book on Courbet, a little monograph on him, a little bitty skinny one. I forget who the publisher was. And this guy, Yvonne Hallendier, wrote the monograph, and it was translated by Anne Ross. So this is a painting of, I picked as an example. It's not the painting he was talking about. So here we go. One day, a painter had habitually worked out of doors facing his subject in the jargon of a landscape painter, settled himself in the country in front of a clump of trees. After a while, a passerby stopped to scrutinize his picture, shook his head and addressed the artist, remarking that whereas he could recognize the sky and the trees, there was a pool on the canvas which did not appear in the natural scene. The landscape painter replied tersely, without pausing in his work. It's behind me. The passersby name has been forgotten, but the painter was, of course, Corot. So here's the painting, and it's a video. So we're going to see the parallax. Hopefully you'll see that it's possible to be painting this way and painting this way, literally rotating 180 degrees. And now I'm turning back to see the pool. Look, it's behind me. It's in the distance. It's not in the foreground. There's the foreground right there on the right side. And then I'll shift back the other way just to double test it. Hopefully you start to see the shifting parallax forms that start to create this illusion of depth going this way as well as back. There's a certain lining up of diagonals that makes me think it's looking that way. It's not looking straight onto it. But the picture clearly reads as a straight on view. Here's a photo. There's a few of him doing the same thing. The question is he posing for the photo and looking at the camera, or is he's illustrating how he paints over his shoulder? How do you do that? I've been out I do this, by the way, and I have artists and the people generally ask the same question. What are you looking at? I don't see that in your picture. And basically I said, well, I'm looking over my shoulder back there and it's all wrapping into the picture from that angle. And when you're working on a big canvas outside, that's a problem. I know people tip it down and they can just look over it. I know people who work small and they just look over it and straight on, and that's all fine. I've done that. I still do it. There's a whole other thing that I do with that. But I can't see over my canvas and I can't see through it. And I finally figured out that the space behind has to radiate into the picture plane. And I've talked to Stanley Lewis about this, and he's not quite sure he gets what I'm talking about. So it's not exactly the way he works, but I do think it's a tight connection with what he does now. So here is your central vision area. Look how narrow it is. And then there's a near peripheral, a mid peripheral, and a far peripheral. There's a foreground, a middle ground, and a background peripheral vision that you're literally, when you're focused in one direction, you still sense that orientation in space. So I started doing this backwards looking as an experiment. At the time, I was painting through a frame off to the side of my canvas when I was in my graduate school work at Tulsa University. But I did these two paintings. They're completely different than all. I was mostly doing still life and a few landscapes where it was a sideways skewed angle. So it is a kind of an interesting difference. And these I somehow was doing them without a frame, and I just naturally started doing this turnaround. And this is before I read the Corot quote. So I wasn't really confident what I was doing was a good idea. So I'd stopped doing this. And it was like, I graduated in 85. I didn't start doing the backwards drawing until 2002, 3. So here's an example of the backwards over the shoulder viewing. You can see the photograph of the same scene where there's a strong diagonal going into the distance. And look how I sort of dropped that diagonal down. So it's not nearly as strong. So you don't have to go completely flat. You can just, right. I've actually done it where I've reversed it. I put the diagonal the opposite direction and tried to make all the relationships work. It's possible. And then here's the finished version of this starting sketch on the right here. And then I finished it. That's the finished version of the same drawing, pastel. I did this last week. First got here, I went on a bike ride. I found this interesting view here. I got out of the forest for a while and there was some sky, and I thought this was an interesting possible composition for a drawing. So I did a quick sketch on the right, and you can see where the pathway is going into classical perspective. And in here, now I've got the pathway. You see this in a lot of Cezanne paintings. The path is going straight across. Wilbur Newald used to have these weird paintings that he wouldn't talk about it though, but my teacher, Wilbur Newald from Kansas City, but he had the same idea. So it's always fascinating. painters don't talk about the stuff they do sometimes. I keep trying to get my friends to talk about what is it? I think we're all like nervous and we're not sure we're right. And it's hard to say things. And this is an over-the-shoulder painting. The photograph actually looks very close to it. But I know when I did it, I was rotating severely to get this angle and that angle to work together. And this is the same idea. I mean, I feel like it's very similar, that over the shoulder that Pissarro was using. And he worked with Cezanne. So, and this was the period of time when he was working more closely with Cezanne. I think they were both working on the same idea. I like this idea here. Okay, so I showed you those weird flippy shapes in the beginning. So this is a Delacroix painting of a horse rearing up. And there is this mathematical property called saddle point. And when I look at saddle point diagrams, I see them twisting rather than just sitting in three-dimensional, normal, conventional space. And I'm thinking, I see this form in my work all the time, only I think it's more related to this Escher print of a Moebius strip, only his is a very complex Moebius strip. So I have been studying Moebius strips and Klein bottle forms. I was talking to Gabriel Latherman on the phone once about the Klein bottle phenomena in painting. So this isn't new to me. I mean, other painters have been thinking about these ideas. And then there's my pastel. And it's the same view as I showed you just a minute ago, looking with that photo beside it. So it's a little more angle. I can pick any angle I want, but I'm probably at a different angle than you might think. And there's a Moebius strip up there, and we call this Douglas Hofstadter, who wrote Gödel, Escher, Bach, which I just loved, and I gave a report in my philosophy class on Gödel, Escher, Bach's book on strange loops. And strange loops are these weird paradoxes that he said happens in physics. It makes its way into the biological model of reality, into the mental model of reality. And he has this whole theory explaining how all this works. It's really hard to get through it. He uses Bach's music, Gödel's mathematics, and then Escher, who's a graphic artist who does these. Clearly, he's doing Moebius strips and trying to figure out in very complex ways to express those ideas. And this drawing for me was this weird thing that starts to happen as that space behind starts to flip to the foreground, and these Moebius strips start to appear in my drawing, and it's like I don't always get it so clearly. But I spent time after that trying to study this winding road at the park near my house, and trying to get that in a more formal way to recognize the Moebius strip happening in the forms. And it's always fun to play with this idea. And then here it is in this Peter Gisels, a Dutch or a Flemish painter. And I think you can see it happening here. It's that same swirly Moebius strip kind of space in this painting. And then I overpainted this painting. I should have left it here, but I got the winding road pastel as a background in my painting, and I'm trying to continue that in the still life setup. And I think you can sort of see those forms doing this strange, weird stuff. Not always, but well, especially on the tabletop. That's a saber-toothed tiger skull that I've got, a replica. That brown thing at the top, you can't recognize it yet. So, and then I do as a demo for my students, I haven't done one like this in a while. The left side is the drawing, and then I've photoshopped and flipped it, reversed it in Photoshop to create this new composition. So I do practice this kind of alien abstract work. I don't show it. I don't produce much of it. It's more of a demo thing I do. But it's so much like Alien, but not. It's my own version of how two-dimensional space can be weird. And this is a Stanley Lewis that I own. And it's like some kind of a femur bone or something, and he's abstracted it into this loopy, strange Moebius form. It's a wonderful, a Necker cube type space. And this is my son's painting. In 7th grade, his art teacher gave him a C. And because, you know, he's got different issues. He's got dyspraxia and he has dysgraphia and all kinds of difficulties. And he's had to overcome. So he's never been good at representational drawing, but I've always given him paints when I'm out painting, and he'll paint, and the colors are amazing. But look at the loopy space that he got, and the art teacher didn't know. And then here's another drawing that Stanley sent me years later. It's the strangest loopy stuff you've ever seen. It's a construction of space. It's hidden in his landscape paintings, but it's in there. He knows how to replicate it into everything he does, and it bends my mind. I can't live up to this weird thing he does. It's really hard for me to do. I had to do it less directly. Now, here's something that I had done in graduate school when I got my MFA. This was a special project. I called it the Vermeer Project, although this is not a Vermeer. This is a Jacob Ochtervelt painting at the Chicago Art Institute. And the funny thing is that I had a postcard in my studio, and I didn't have a digital camera back then. And I had the postcard. I thought, oh, that's how I remember it. And then I found out later, after I went back, after I finished this project, that it was flipped. So the postcard was flipped. So I set this up when I had a huge studio at grad school. And so I was able to set up lighting with fluorescent lights on one side. I tried to replicate this painting in the studio. And to do it, I kept playing with everything and to match it. And there's a film called Tim's Vermeer, where this tech guy creates this camera lucidity system that is very interesting. Question is that how Vermeer worked? People are claiming that Vermeer worked through either a camera lucidity process or through a camera obscura. So and so that's a whole controversy in art history. But this is the actual setup. So there I am. I ghosted myself in Photoshop there. There's one of the levels of the drawing I was working on at the time. I have the shell where the dog is, but over here I changed it to a pumpkin. And I moved the shell to where the guy playing that weird musical instrument is, but here I have it as the pumpkin. So I flipped those two objects later. I also constructed a viola out of foam core, and then a friend across the street gave me a body for an electric guitar that he wasn't going to take with him when he moved. So I flipped that in. And so looking down, you can see that in this case, the pumpkin on the right side of the photo is behind me. Literally, I had to twist around to see it. And then the shell is right there at my knee. Right, really close. But the picture space appears as if you're looking through a camera obscura. So my mission was to prove that space can wrap around you, but in the pictorial form looks illusionistically like you're looking from a distance at it. And so this was my mission. And that was a part of my master's thesis at NIU. That was one section of it. And so backing up, I superimposed different drawings I had done in a Photoshop montage over here on the right, so that this would be planned out to be the final painting I would like to still do from this, but I've never gotten to it. And here is the black and white version, my version, and you can see I cropped it to show you the space that was actually in the original painting or similar. And then here is a conceptual, Stanley does these conceptual drawings like Picasso did of the artist and the model. And I tried to show this Necker cube space that I was experiencing, because when you're changing angles all the time, it's doing weird things. So it's a loopy space, even though it doesn't look loopy. And so that's the fascinating part of my study. Okay, so the perceptual dichotomy and inventory, a division in how something is perceived, often into two contrasting or opposing categories. So visual perception in my thesis is that it's this contrasting and opposing categories of viewing things. Here are the different parts of vision. Motion parallax is the big movement thing that you see in film. And driving down the street, I love motion parallax driving down the road. I see paintings everywhere I go. Binocular vision, that's what I did my first master's thesis on, and wrote that on how painting can work with binocular vision. Saccadic motion, it's a quick simultaneous movement of both eyes. So your eyes are always shifting around to find your perceptual field. Ocular parallax, it's tiny eye movements. So not big shifting movement, but just tiny ones. Even when you're focusing on reading or close-up objects, you never hold still. There's always parallax. Microstagmus, rapid, very small, amplitude, involuntary eye movements. Your eye basically vibrates. Now, the trick is that if you cut the muscles that make the eye scintillate like that, you will be blind in that eye until you move your head. So like T-Rex in the first Jurassic Park movie, you can't see you unless you move. He only sees movement. That was the concept, that T-Rex, and they were wrong. They found out later, T-Rex has all of this capability that we have. But the idea was if you can't move your eye, you will go blind. You can experiment with this at home, and you won't permanently go blind. So it's okay. But if you try to like hold your eye very still by focusing on like a dot and see and close the other eye and see if your vision starts to fade. You can get it to happen. It's hard because it's involuntary. You can't hardly hold it for long. It's like breathing. You really can't hold your breath too long. So that's the framework of human perception, but there's more to it. There's a perceptual synthesis that occurs from all of this motion parallax that we experience. The perceptual synthesis refers to the brain's ability to integrate and organize sensory information into a coherent and meaningful experience. But one of the things that's important that I learned with binocular vision is perceptual psychologists have this concept called a cyclopean image. It is a single mental image of a scene created by the brain through the process of combining two images received from both eyes and crucial to stereo vision. So how do you harness a cyclopean image as a painter? That's actually the goal of painting, is to make everything a cyclopean image. It's a mental image that you somehow merge into your painting. Modularity, independent effect of gravity is number 2. So the gravity shapes the internal representation of 3D space. So a lot of painters who are abstract painters, oh, gravity is not important, verticality is not important. A painting can be flipped, turned any way. Oh, that's all true. But for a perceptual painter, it's not. Gravity is a big part of how you construct your cyclopean experience of reality. How do you fuse that view in your brain? It's actually never totally fused. There's always a little motion parallax of this dichotomy between two angles of view. 3, visual and haptic perceptual distortions play a role in gravity-related signals on the modularity independent effect. So haptic. There's another term for it, is kinesthetic space. So kinesthetic is the sense of your body position in space, which is what I usually write about. Haptic is a new word for me since I got my smartwatch. Oh, haptic, that's cool. It's a sense of touch. But kinesthetic is also a sense of touch, but it's a 3-dimensional orientation of touching space with your body. And that's what painting for me is about, is touching space with my body, all that turning and twisting and contrapposto of my head to my shoulders. It all relates to how the painting form develops. And then 4, head and body movements, like I just said, particularly voluntary ones, build a stable representation towards interpreting spatial relationships and object movement orientation. It's very complex. That's what that's supposed to mean. It's very complex. We have all of this going on, and yet we always are oriented pretty well in space. We don't really lose unless you spin around and get dizzy, or you got an ear infection. Things like that can throw everything off. Now, let's look at stereo vision. This is not a new idea of movies nowadays. It's been going on in movies for a long time. It was going on in the 19th century. I'm thinking this is 19th century. especially look at the tile pattern on the floor, you can see a shift. That one's more straight up and down on the left, and this one you can see a little more angle. So everything is slightly shifted on the right, so it represents two eye views, two angles, and then it's a stereogram. And we used to have those fun stereograms that were like abstract images, and then a horse would emerge. You can also do this with photography. You can get the stereoscopes, or you can use photography and cross your eyes. You have to stare at it just the right way. It's really hard to do. But once you find it, you can sort of shift your head up and down and around, and you get this 3D image. It's really cool, just like having the movie glasses on. Leonardo da Vinci, yeah, there's illustrations of him showing how to draw things clearly monocularly. And then there's other weird things that he does. Like, why would he have a student sit next to him painting the same model? Look at the shifting spaces in the background. Those rocks, things are slightly shifted. And this is the clean version, the digital version that they did, an AI cleanup of the original, because it's so dark now. But if you stare at the dot and you're at the right distance, the two images will become a cyclopean image in your brain, and you'll be able to sway a little bit and see both sides of the head. And I'm pretty sure Leonardo da Vinci knew about this, and the historical record shows that he wrote about stereo vision. But again, artists don't always explain everything they do. So the question is each of these paintings is probably stereoscopic unto themselves. They're cyclopean, frozen, freeze-like images of stereo vision. But then you can have stereo vision combined with stereo vision, and you can multiply the illusion. So I know it's true because Lego Leonardo shows us how he did this. And this is a drawing I just realized I had in my photo collection late last night, and I popped it in there real quick, showing a diagram of someone talking about stereoscopic vision and how it works. Now, there's all these drawings of artists working through these frame spaces. And a frame space is a great way to study binocular vision, but it's also a way to study monocular vision. But even in monocular vision, your eye is moving. Remember, there's a rotation that you have to do without moving your head to see every corner. Yeah, even using a camera lucidia, I made my own, by the way. I test all this stuff. You have to shift it slightly. So it's interesting that Hockney did this. He does talk about the shifting. And even with the camera obscura, to keep it in focus, even Tim Jensen did it too with his camera lucidia, a very elaborate system he set up. There's a slight shift, so there's parallax. So they never talk about the parallax as being the key to what is important. So if Vermeer was using the system, he was studying parallax, not a monocular parallax rather than a binocular parallax. But I think he did binocular vision. And then this is a Dürer. I have set this up in my studio. I'm still working on this project. It's a hard one. It's literally a pinnacle right there that you're using for some reason. Does he move it? There's some indication that it moves to each row or each column. But anyway, it seems like an obvious monocular translation of grid to grid that you would do, say, if you're copying a photo or a paint or drawing to a bigger canvas. But then this guy, look how far away the little dot is on that viewfinder, even the one that's closer to him. How does that work? How is he using this alignment? Is it for a monocular representation of space, or is it for a binocular representation? I'm asking the question because I haven't truly done the peephole thing a lot, but I did try a Dürer version of it, and he literally has this circular peephole right up to his eye like this. And then the other eye is still open in the illustration, and you wonder how that works. And when I put my camera up to it, I get this little bitty tiny circle opening. I can't see the rest of the space. So I'm not sure how that works, but I do think it's a way to teach vision in probably multiple ways. So you get a full scope of visual perception and drawing, not just monocular photographic type perception. Constable, he worked through a frame. I was so excited to hear this. In this publication by Uris Wayne, John Constable read about an experiment with theories of visual perspective that were published before and during his lifetime. Constable used mechanisms such as a drawing frame to produce compositions that revealed his understanding of the geometry of vision and the dynamics of visual perception. It's on the internet. It's at the Tate. Here is the frame. Notice that there's this sort of compression of the grid in the middle. Kind of like Giacometti. Ever notice Giacometti paintings that compress in the middle and they expand on the sides? It's interesting. Edward Noble was the guy who invented this particular drawing frame. I don't think Constable actually used it. I think he had made his own frame, but he did study it. He did read about it. He did probably experiment with this idea. I think he knew Edward Noble. But here you go. Both eyes are clearly open in this illustration of a drawing frame. And I find this fascinating. Now, here he is looking straight out. So it's definitely a binocular vision study. It's not the wraparound space that I've been talking about. And I think that's fascinating illustration. It makes all those other illustrations make sense. And I think this is how Constable worked. I read that he had a string and he held in his mouth and he tied it to the corners of the frame, so that he had to lock himself into one position with his body and head so he could study. And it doesn't say that he closed one eye. It wasn't a monocular study of space. It was very clearly binocular. And here's his grid. You can see there is some expansion. The grid on the right, that space there is a little wider than the center one. So I think he invented his own version. And I also think it's fairly equal up until the center, and then it expands that one column, and then it cuts off over there, so you don't really see. But it's like a wraparound grid, a distortion process that he's correcting. Now, these are Stanley Lewis drawings, and one of them I own. The other three I snuck out and photocopied and put them back in his office. Anyway, here's how he did these. This is interesting. This is when he first started teaching me how to draw through a frame. And I was one of the few students that really grasped this that I know of at the time. But here's what he did. He taught me, Tim, take this sculpture wire. And we tore the studio down at the end of the semester and did sculpture, by the way, figure sculpture. So he always had sculpture wire handy. And we'd take the sculpture wire and we'd tape it to our drawing pad. And then we'd hold the drawing pad in the crux of our arm. And the wire would be out here, the little rectangular frame, the same size as the drawing pad. And we would turn our head, look at this contrapposto view. My head's turned into, here's my shoulders. And looking through the frame, the left eye would look through the frame and the right eye would look at the paper. So you're looking right down the center. So one eye, you actually see a transfer of the image onto the paper. It's like tracing. So similar to the way a camera or the Lucidia works. And only you can't help but move your head rather than just your eyeballs. So you're getting even more parallax in the process. I don't do it anymore, but it was so much fun, and he did it so much better than me. He really focused on this for a long time. And these, except for this one, this was through a frame, but this was more the way I draw. And this was a demo for a drawing he did for me. Look at that weird loopy form off to the right. He's talking about, and you can see how the back foot is down lower because the angle of the frame caused things that are in the distance to drop into the foreground. Very important concept. And you can sort of see this Moebius space that he's trying to show me about. And this is back in the late 70s. So this is my drawing through a frame, and then there's a painting through a frame. Now, the difference is that I was still trying to keep it monocular, one eye, and but I wasn't tracing. I found that I couldn't do it that way, so I kept looking into the frame with both eyes. So this has a binocular appearance. Here, I really stuck with it. Only the right corner, which there's nothing there to paint, was I seeing both the view of the still life and the painting as a binocular experience. But I wasn't paying any attention to it. So this was peripheral vision. Stanley had been teaching about peripheral vision for a long time, trying to show how there's this angle that you have to find in peripheral vision, and everything kind of folds out after that. These are frame paintings I did, looking directly off to the side. I would literally clamp it to my canvas, so it's literally parallel this way. So I'm looking at a skewed angle. distortion. Everything distorts to the far end. It expands. It's anamorphic. Now I've gone back to frame painting. I've played with it off and on because I'm working on this new kind of presentation paper thing I'm trying to write. I'm trying to experiment with it. So this is something I did last summer at artist residency in Chickasha, Oklahoma. And, or actually I was a visiting artist. And the frame is there that I've just hinged. And it also works great because when you close it, you can stack paintings and they don't rub off on each other. So it's like, it has a dual purpose. It's a wonderful invention. I didn't thought about it before. And you just screw it, and you got these thick frames. You just put some cheap hinges and screw it on, and you close it up at the end of the day. I also have a bar and I have these eyelet screws, and I can adjust the angle of the frame. And I'm either using like a 45-degree angle off the canvas or a 90-degree angle. I've done both ways. And it's fun to work with. And I feel like it changes the space a bit. And it's binocular. And there's a head turning, there's wrapping space. I'm looking over my shoulder, just like a Corot. Now I'll talk about trapezoidal space, locking in the shifting perspectives. There's a Cezanne two-table experiment that Stanley taught me about. Also, he had me try to find this in Dutch still life painting. So here's the Ames room. Look at the trapezoidal space. And so it's a weird illusion where you look through an eye hole and with one eye, and you can make the same guy with 3 different sizes in the same room. But it's a trapezoidal shaped room. So you're farther back, but it makes you small, but it puts you in the foreground or in the middle ground in this case. And Albert Ames was a painter first, and then became a perceptual psychologist and did all this cool work. Which is more going on with him than just this, but I can't cover it all. So the room is designed to look like a normal rectangular space when viewed from a specific point, but is actually trapezoidal. So it's the idea that he's creating this facade of a space, but in reality, it's something different. And it's very much like this Cezanne at the Chicago Art Institute, which I see every time I go. And Stanley was just there a few weeks ago, and he talked to me a little bit about, he was drawing from this painting. But the idea is that he taught me was this 2-table concept where you set up your still life with 2 tables. One table's back and tilted forward, and the other table is front and tilted down, or you're looking down on it, so you have to tilt it up. And the idea is to try to line up the back edge and the front edge. Now, Cezanne never actually got it perfect, unlike Dutch painters. He was like trying to teach you something. He was a teacher. He never got to teach, but he was a teacher. All his paintings were teaching other painters what he understood. And so he purposefully left it ambiguous. Where is the table edge? It's like 3 possibilities on the right side and 2 possibilities on the left side. It's really interesting. But when you study this painting, and now this is a Dutch painting by William Klaus Hedde. And Stanley said these are done the same way. So I've been studying these Dutch paintings all along. So here's the video of the Cezanne. Let's see if you see the shifting space. But now you're looking from this side, and you're like looking, and then the space on the right side is behind, right? And I think that might be the way he did it. But I usually do it because I'm right-handed. I don't paint over my shoulder this way when I'm crossing, but Stanley does. I've seen other artists do it. So it could be done either way. And then here's the Dutch. Watch to see if the same thing kind of happens. So you can actually see the back end of that big pewter thing there. It's like that's the angle he set it up at, and he's looking over to the other table. Only he's perfect. That's what they are. The Dutch painters are always perfect. The illusion is never given away, but they have all these perspective optical boxes that they build, and they were experimenting with camera lucidia, camera obscura, and optics and projections into camera obscura rooms. I mean, they were studying all this stuff, and there's no reason just to stop at monocular vision when you're scientifically studying how perception works. Here's my still life. There's the right side. here you can see I had this aluminum frame I built with lame elastic that I bought from the fabric store. You can stretch it and it holds its straight lines. Here I have a center line grid and then a cross line, and trying to see through this angle, but then on the bottom, so you sort of see it line up. The two tables are lined up exact, which is what I'm trying to paint. But here, when you step back, you can see how different the levels are, and that the left side is so much further back. It's almost 6 feet back at the back of the table from the front edge of this table. So there's a lot of depth in there. And I'm trying to lock it in using this lock-in method. And Matisse talked about the double buckle in his work. He doesn't really explain it, but so now this is how that painting is at this point. It's not quite finished yet, but I'm getting there. I keep changing objects around. And there's a certain symbolism I'm interested in still life painting. But flattening the S or compound curve composition, the parallax is retained but disguised. So the S, I gotta come up here. Here is the S. Only instead of it being an S on my canvas, it's a straight line. So I'm compressing the S into a straight line, which it still reads perceptually at the intuitive level, but I'm hiding it. I'm making a facade of it. So I believe that's kind of what Dutch and Cezanne still lifes are about. And also their landscapes. I mean, I think it's throughout. Here's a finished oil pastel on canvas, a rather large 30 by 40 that I did. So, and you can see at this time the table is tipped, and it almost looks like that pot, the black pot is going to fall off. And I purposely put that rope in there to kind of play with that illusion over there. And I like to put my paintings or my pastels in as if they're in the background. So I'm looking out a window. His Duran just blows me away every time I look at it. Conventionally stacked perspective imagery cues distance by placing objects closest to the viewer at the bottom of the frame and objects further away from the viewer at the top. So stacked space, like we saw earlier on. Unconventional stacked perspective moves horizontally, layering elements that are meant to be further away side to side, with the front next to things behind the artist. And I think you can see in this underground painting, this sense of the space is stacking this way, or it's could be stacking that way. So the depth illusion is going, as Cezanne said, painting should have breadth, width, and not just depth. He said depth too, but any Cezanne painting has that kind of flat figure ground reversal form, that kind of spoon. And Matisse talked about paintings should be convex. They shouldn't cave in, they should bow out. So here's Stanley, you can see him painting, and then you can see the painting from this angle, and then you see this structure here. Is it holding the roof up? No, it's a frame. He told me that Leland Bell poo-pooed him when he talked to him about his frame experiments with frame painting. And so he stopped doing it for a long time. He did it covertly, but he didn't talk about it anymore. And but look, it's not just a rectangular frame, it's a trapezoidal frame. It's an Ames frame. When I saw that, it blew me away because I was trying to figure out other ways to apply the frame. And he did it. And we did talk about, after I left Kansas City, where we were working with that peripheral vision idea, it was pretty much not a binocular study of space. And then, like, when I was at TU, Tulsa University, I said, Stanley, I moved my head into the frame now and I'm studying binocular vision. He said, I am too. So we were not together, but together. And there's the painting. This is at the Swope Museum in Terre Haute. It must weigh 500 pounds because you know how thick they get. And he couldn't sell it because of the weight. And so it was at Betty Cunningham, as far as I understood it. And so he gifted it to the Swope Museum. And Amy McLennan and my other friend, Mike Neary, drove to New York to pick it up. And it's now a permanent hanging at the Swope Art Museum in Terre Haute. The end.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
They're in a boat.
A mirror? Well, first of all, a mirror is binocular. And it has parallax because it's not like a photographic plate where it's static. It captures a static moment in time. The mirror shifts with you. So Leonardo da Vinci talked about, he found that reality was better in a mirror than directly. So the mirror reinforces the flatness of the picture plane, and yet you can get different angles in a mirror. You're not stuck with just being in front of the mirror. If you're using a mirror to paint something over there, you're going to shift it. So it's like painting different angles through a frame, all these different angles of shifting the mirror idea. And that's where I really feel Da Vinci was talking about binocular vision and this wraparound space more.
I don't think that cubism is like taking an object from all angles. Would you call how?
You're right, but you're wrong. Okay, here's the big dispute. Before you get to the second part of your question, the cubists were studying Cezanne. Cezanne clearly sat in one spot and painted, but you can see paintings, pictures of him looking this way and looking that way. So there is this sweep of space in his paintings. Andre Derain was the first one to start kind of doing this, and Picasso, Braque, and the others followed along. And then Derain dropped it and went more classical. But there is a shifting angle, but is it like I'm over here, then I'm over here? You know, even Hockney doesn't do that. He does these paintings where he just shifts the eye level. I think other painters have done this. You lower your eye level, and it's like and then you put it together for a full collage. Yeah. Parallax is shifting angles. So you can do that, what you're talking about, create compositions from all different points of view, but it's going to look fractured. And if you could heal it and mesh it together and fuse it in a way, that would be interesting. And I think some painters have probably messed with that. Certainly surrealists have played with that kind of space. So I'm not ruling that out. But I do think when art historians say it's over here, I've actually had people tell me this. You know, I'm on this side of the room, then I'm on this side, and I'm collaging it together. That's a photographic concept of space, because that's what you do with a photograph. Every time you shift the angle of a camera, you get a totally fracture of the previous position. When you merge them together, and I do this, by the way, I didn't add any in here, but I'll photograph my sweep of space and my angle up and my angle down to get the whole sphere of my vision. And then I flatten it out. I never do the curved space thing. Stanley and me agree. Stanley said, never draw that curved stuff. Straight lines. That's how we perceive space. That's reality. The curvature is an optical effect that we all have in our eyes. And the fisheye lens idea is cool. I know some really great painters that do that. I'm not saying that's bad. I think they're studying sort of the same phenomena I am. But as a convention, we believe in the straight line theory of painting, because that's reality. That's what we actually perceive. So, all right, did I answer your question? It's a hard question. It's a really good one, though.
The cubist grid, like the cubists were using this thing called the cubist grid.
The cubist grid.
And I think you kind of touched on it, but I guess
That's interesting. I never heard that before. That's cool. I'll have to look up the cubist grid. I have not ever come across that before. But that's fascinating. I mean, there's so much out there that you like. I didn't ever know that this idea of Corot painting over his shoulder until 2003 or 4, or maybe it was even earlier, but not much earlier. And it's like it's completely changed my outlook on thinking of painting after that. So cubist grid could be another interesting thing. I'll have to study it. Hey, see if you can find something for next class. I'd like to see what you're talking about, because that sounds really cool. Any other questions?
Hey, thank you. The talk was amazing. I was just wondering if you could recommend
a good book on perception? There's so many out there. So what's your top pick?
I haven't read a book on perception since 1985. Well, I probably have, but I published my master's thesis. It's on academia.edu. Both master's theses are on there under Timothy King. You can probably find it real easily. It's also on, was it ResearchGate, which I think is easier to get into. And I have a few other writings on there that kind of connect into it all. But everybody that ever reads this stuff say it's really hard. And so it's hard because I have to condense it for a master's thesis. They wouldn't let me write a dissertation. They kept saying, Tim, it's too long. It's 30 pages. You need it down to like 10. And I got them to compromise to 14, but that includes pages of illustrations that I created. So it has illustrations. I hope it might help you. I can't guarantee it will, but there are a list of perceptual psychology sources I used. But some new stuff has been developed since then that I just grabbed off the internet for this presentation about that gravity and orientation of space thing. That's a study that wasn't there then. And just like, wow, that's important because I think that's how most painters drop a plumb line at some point in their career to help them with that perfect vertical of gravity. So yeah, so that would be a source. I can't remember the names of the authors, but generally speaking, it's all peer reviewed. So any good, interesting, intro to perceptual psychology should be fine. It's not like the art world where there's no peer review. People just say what they want. I try to be scientific with my work and try to make sure that things that I do are within reality rather than, so I feel like I'm a realist painter, but certainly I'm an abstract painter at the same time. And when you go into abstraction, you can go into all kinds of other things. And there's a certain interest in surrealism and having these weird spaces can be surrealistic. So I'm not sure where one end begins and the other one goes away in this, but hopefully any good thing on perceptual psychology should be but they're not all like, there are guys who wrote about specifically perceptual psychology and art. I think a lot of them are out of date now. And maybe I'm the update because they don't talk about stuff I do. And they're not painters, by the way. They're philosophers or can't think of the names offhand, but Albert Ames, read about Albert Ames. Read anything he wrote or a synopsis on what he wrote because he's the guy. He knows what space is like, and he was a painter. So I think he was trying to get at something, but I don't think he ever wrote a thesis on how it all went into painting, which maybe he died too soon. It's hard to figure that part of it out. So, and this was my first attempt to try to consolidate it, and I haven't even dealt with all of it yet. There's other things that I could talk about. I tried to give you a broad view of the areas that you could go into or be interested in. Mostly, I just hope this is a good art appreciation to give you a perspective that maybe you hadn't heard before.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I just say one more thing? It's been such a pleasure being here at Mount Gretna. I can't even tell you, this has been a joy. So I've been painting, I've been working with students and bike riding, getting stuck in riding through thunderstorms. It's been a wonderful time. So.